Thank you, and welcome back to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kevin. Welcome back for our 62nd episode this week, where we'll be recapping what was hopefully rock bottom for the Patriots as they lost 34-0 to the formerly 2-2 Saints, who are now 3-2. We'll also be assessing where this team is likely headed going forward and previewing the Patriots' upcoming game in Vegas versus the Raiders. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pats300LevelPod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day, as well as at our website at Pats300LevelPod.com. So, Kevin, another week, another tough loss. I know for me, after the Cowboys game, thinking this is the worst game I've ever seen for the Patriots. And then the following week, I think was just even worse. Not only was it a shutout loss, but it was a loss to a team that realistically the Patriots should have beaten or at least played competitively. And just for it to be Belichick's second worst loss of his career as well, following the Cowboys loss the week before. So I know it's kind of got me a little discouraged. I don't know where any of this is going to go forward, and we're going to touch upon that as the episode goes on. But what was just your initial thoughts to the game?
Initial thoughts were it sucked. Obviously, like the Cowboys game sucked to watch. Luckily, I was away during the Cowboys, so I just shut my phone off so that way I didn't have to watch that anymore.
Yeah,
Um, but it was an ugly loss. I think the biggest thing like coming out of that game though is everyone coming out of that wants to blame Mac Jones for it and says he
yeah,
sucks and he's the reason why they lost. And if you're one of those people that think that Mac Jones was the biggest problem here and he was the reason why they lost 34-0, you obviously aren't watching everything that's around this team. The biggest problem with them is the offensive line. With the last 2 weeks, last really 3 weeks actually,
yeah.
Mac has gotten pressure rating of this last week was 45.8%. The Cowboys game was 50%. Those are the two highest of his career, and even the Jets
The
game
Jets
was in
was the Jets was the third highest of
Jets
his
was third
career at
highest in
like
his career.
43 point something percent too. So the
Yeah.
last three games were the most pressures he's ever seen.
Mhm. And we've talked about this kind of really ad nauseum with the offensive line over the last really 3 years.
3 years.
And it's something that it is frustrating because we've always mentioned it being a problem with them, and it really hasn't gotten better. It's actually gotten worse. And you think it wouldn't want to get worse with them hiring Adrian Clem. Um, but anything higher than 30% is going to disrupt a pocket passer quarterback. Anything over 35% is going to really disrupt them and make them really inefficient. And anything over 40%, they're doomed. There's no way that they could
Yeah.
actually really come back from that. There's nothing they could really do at 40%. And you're seeing it 3 weeks in a row, even higher than that. So it's a little ridiculous, and nothing's going to improve if they can't improve that offensive line. So the two biggest really areas I wouldn't even say would have Mac Jones in that conversation. One would be the offensive line. Two would be the receiving core. And again, this is the most frustrating part of this, is where our two biggest concerns going in the from the offseason were the offensive line and the receiving core, how it's going to look, and they're just not getting separation at all. And I think the other thing too, which is also frustrating, seeing in the news where everyone's like, "Oh, like you could have had Jacoby Myers, but you have Juju Schuster." Well, if you have Jacoby Myers here, he doesn't get separation either, and uh, yeah, he's nice and he gets nice catches and he's a really good go-to guy, and that's something they don't have. But if he's not getting separate, no one's getting separation. We need someone that can get separation. There's only really one person on this team right now that can do it. And he's hurt, and that's Pop Douglas. And we'll get into this afterwards, but there's a couple more people on the horizon that may come and help. But yeah, I think if you have to put Mac anywhere on this list of reasons why it was so bad, I would say he was probably number three.
Yeah, so as most of you, if you've been following us and know us, I am a very big Mac Jones guy. I have been since college. I wanted the Patriots to draft him. I still believe in him. The last two games have been pretty bad. The Cowboys game by far worst game of his career. There's no debating that. This last game again, still made some bad decisions that are uncharacteristic to what we've seen the first 2+ years of his career.
Mhm.
Part of it is on the offensive line where he's just doesn't have time to throw. There's one sack where both defensive ends were about to touch Mac Jones at 1.36 seconds against both tackles. So if he's facing pressure like that, he's obviously going to be trying to step up and throw the ball quick. And sometimes if you're doing that without fully reading the defense, you're going to make bad decisions. So I think part of it is it's starting to get into his head, just anticipating pressure. And then it also doesn't help that his receivers aren't getting separation. I think one thing he really needs to learn is when to take a sack. And that's something that Brady traditionally did very well. There were some times where Brady would try and throw it away and then throw a bad interception because he didn't want to sack. Because it's just instinct as a quarterback where you don't want to give up a free play to the defense. But he hasn't been great. But again, a lot of this, in my opinion, is due to the two factors that you said: the offensive line being absolutely horrendous, and the frustrating part too is it's not just, yes, they are banged up with injuries, but it's not just the right tackle position, which everyone saw as a weakness. The interior line has been awful too. David Andrews has been very bad to start the season, and he's supposed to be one of your strengths on the offensive line. Michael Onwenu, he's been hurt, so you kind of have to give a pass there. When he's been in, he hasn't been great, not awful compared to the rest of the line, but again, not great. And then just the turnstile at left guard because of injuries. And then Trent Brown's just inconsistency. The game versus the Jets, best game of his career. The last game, it just looked like he gave up. So you need to have more consistency. You need to have more effort on this offensive line. And then, like you said, it does. Part of the reason why wide receivers are also not getting separation is because they don't have time to get separation because of what the offensive line is giving Mac Jones. But also, they're not as fast, they're not as shifty. You don't have an Edelman type or a Wes Welker type that can get you quick separation to get out in the slot. So I think that's something that they're going to really have to work on this week in practice. Hopefully they do, to scheme up routes where it gives the advantage to the players and they play to their strength. But again, Mac Jones does have to play better than he has the last 2 weeks. The first 3 weeks of the season, I thought he played very well, and it looked like he was taking that next step. But hopefully, he can get back on track.
Yep. I think the other thing too, that you kind of mentioned it. I just want to make sure that people understand it. I think one of Mac's biggest things he needs to work on, other than the taking sack, and that kind of really actually does kind of involve taking the sack, is that a lot of times we see him because I think he realizes sometimes that they're really screwed, they're fucked.
Yeah.
And he tries to do a little bit too much, more than he can actually physically do, and that's when it gets him into trouble. So I think part of it is him just trying to make a play, because he realized they're not in a great spot right now. So I think it's just him trying to do too much and not really focusing on that do your job kind of mantra. So yeah. One thing before we get into the defense, and kind of really going still into the offense, I think we're kind of getting off script here, but I think it fits in better here anyway. Would be Bill mentioned after the game that they were going to do a reset, and start over again. You kind of mentioned a couple things on how to kind of reset and what to do. It really made me think of back in 2008,
2018.
When they come at the end of the season, they had that really bad Steelers loss, and they really completely reset their offense, and they went
and
back
that was
to
after the Dolphins lost, correct? Or the Dolphins loss was the following week? It was one or the other. I know they lost back-to-back games to the Dolphins and the Steelers, the Miami Miracle. I don't remember which was which, but after those two losses, they did the reset.
Yeah, and that's when they focused on what they actually really did well. That was the ground and pound game, play action, and working that way. So it's been something that they've done before, where they've reset and they've reset later in the season. So it's not something too alarming where they can't do it now. It's just they really have to focus on what they do well, and they have done stuff well. Like you've said, we saw it in the first 2 weeks. Not really this third week as much, but we saw them being able to score and being able to go up
move
against
the ball at least.
Yeah,
like the first 2 weeks they moved the ball. They didn't always execute once they got to the newer red zone of like inside the 35, but they were at least moving the ball downfield, and then there was a turnover or something else. But the last 2 weeks they haven't even been able to move the ball.
So yeah, I think that's it. I think one of the things that they're going to have to start just getting involved in more, and once he's healthy, would be Pop. But again, he gets a lot of separation, but he doesn't run his routes as cleanly, so it's something he has to clean up. Tyquan Thornton's coming back off the IR. I think that should help them out. we don't really know how he's going to be.
Yeah.
I like to hope that he won't be a second round bust. Um, but we'll see. Maybe he might be the spark that ends up turning the season over again. Him and Riley Reef. And then we got some booty action coming in this week probably.
Hopefully.
So I'm kind of really hopefully excited to see what he does. Is he going to be able to take control of his opportunity here? Or is it going to really be a Rieger game instead? Because Booty actually really, him and Parker are more of the same player, so maybe Rieger might take over more. Um, I really would hope that Booty would take more spots from Parker because I'm just really disappointed with him lately. I feel like he's just not aggressive enough,
Yep.
and he doesn't look like that fight for the ball one-on-one guy like everyone has said he's supposed to be.
Yeah.
He's just not really strong enough when it comes to that, and there's not as much fight with him. And then Juju, he's hurt this week, but he hasn't shown anything, and it'd be best, I would say, even just to set him for a few weeks, just to get him right, because something obviously isn't right in his mind or in his legs or what have you. But just because you paid him over the offseason doesn't mean you have to play him.
Yep.
So obviously play the best guys you have, and clearly they probably didn't think that he was one of the best guys in the first game because he wasn't out there for the last play. So yeah, so there was a lot of talking for me.
Yeah.
Defense. Why don't you take over there?
Yeah. So defense, I not great, not bad. Again, I don't think the Saints. I think they didn't score 20 points going into in a single game going into the game, and then they scored 34 points. Granted, there was the pick six, but the Patriots allowed only about 300 yards on offense for the Saints, which isn't a lot, but to still give up 28 offensive points to that, they were playing zone, and the Saints weren't gaining yards all the time, but when they needed to execute, they typically did. Overall, Alvin Kamara rushed 22 times for 80 yards, so only 3.6 yards per carry. But it seemed every time he got the ball on third down, he always converted for a first down. Michael Thomas, 4 catches, 65 yards. They held Chris Olave to 2 catches for only 12 yards, but one of them being a touchdown. So overall, like if you look at the stats, they played pretty decent. But knowing what the Saints offense was before we got to this game, knowing what the Patriots defense is and what they're capable of, even without their top three cornerbacks, they still didn't play a great game. Even in the run game, like I said, they were Saints average less than 4 yards a carry overall between all their running backs, but they typically executed when they needed to. And that's something that the Patriots looked like they were just not going through the fundamentals. It was a or missed tackle here, bad read by in zone coverage here and there. Overall, just not a great game for a unit that should be leading this team. Like we said, it's tough to do a lot, especially when the offense is putting the Patriots offense is not executing and then resulting in the Saints or opposing team having good field position. So there's only so much a defense can do. But against this team, especially Derek Carr, who the Patriots made look atrocious last year, they should have been able to do more. Again, it wouldn't have made a difference because even if they took away 2 touchdowns, Patriots still lose 20-0. So it doesn't make a difference. But going forward, this defense is going to have to be championship caliber if the Patriots want any chance of sniffing the playoffs, which we'll get into in a little bit if that's even possible. But
All right. We're going to skip 3 up, 3 down this week because there was no up, really. You could
yeah,
say a couple of the defensive guys, Lawrence Guy was actually pretty good, Tavai.
Tavai was pretty
But
good, but
um,
overall,
overall, yeah, not really much good going on. Down,
and
you
pretty
could
much
list
everyone was
everyone.
down.
So
Yeah.
we really start about what's going wrong with the season. So let's go into anything else you want to hit in there before we go into where they headed for the rest of the year.
Yeah, so I'll use this as a transition to kind of talk about both. Alluded to it a little bit of Patriots going back to the fundamentals, trying to see what worked right and what can they do to really go forward to turn things around, especially on the offensive end. And when you look at the first 3 games, you want to see what worked for them well, what worked for them didn't. The last 2 games, absolutely nothing worked, so you just scrap those. And pretty much what worked was the fast-paced 2-minute offense, and shotgun quick snaps. Shotgun at least gives Mac enough time to be away from an opposing rush, especially this upcoming week. They're going up against Max Crosby, who's arguably one of the top 2 or 3 rushers in NFL. And especially him going against Lowe or whoever is stuck at right tackle is going to be a mismatch most likely. But go with the positions that or offensive plays that likely give the team an advantage. So quick off or shotgun, quick snaps, mix in some running game, some play action overall. Your best player on offense is Ramondre Stevenson. So you have to find a way to get him the ball and get him the ball in space, whether it's power runs to a certain side or up the middle, whether it's just getting him screens and then allowing him to break tackles and make people miss. So that's what they're going to have to do. Get the ball in your best player's hands and then also design plays to play to your players' strengths.
Yep, and this is something that actually reminded me of back in the Cam Newton year. So when they actually started using Damian Harris a little bit in the Wildcat as well. So I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't say you do it all the time, but maybe a couple plays here and there, which may end up having gives them a little bit more running room where he could start off that way.
Yep.
But yeah, we said it that year. We didn't have the podcast that year, but you have to find a way to get the ball in your best player's hand, and obviously it's him. And then when Pop comes back, he's really the most dynamic. So is there a way they can get the ball on him? And then even Marcus Jones. So whenever he comes back,
he might not be coming back.
He might. If he does, we did see him on one offensive play, so it's obviously not dead yet with him there. So, is there something that they maybe might go towards him too, or even Taekwon? Is there a way that he can be more explosive? So,
and I still think another way to really, considering who you have at your wide receiver, is with you have Douglas, you have Schuster who's underperformed, you have Parker who's underperformed, you have Bourne who looks like he's not always running the right route. I think what you really do is you start with your running attack, mix in some play actions, and then you go with that 2 tight end offense that really helped the Patriots excel in the 2010-2011 season. Granted, Gronk and Aaron Hernandez were were more dynamic players than what you have in Gesicki and Henry, but still they provide a big mismatch with Gesicki being 6'6", essentially slot receiver. You have Hunter Henry, who has been your best weapon on offense, which is kind of sad considering he leaves the team with only 170 receiving yards through 5 games. But I think that's another way where if you're trying to scheme up mismatches, them either size-wise versus cornerbacks or speed-wise versus linebackers, that might be another way to do that.
right. Really, where you see this season going now? Is it completely lost? Are they dead in the water? Is there a way they can turn this around?
So I have no idea. Yeah, I could see it going 3 ways. I could see it where they lose this weekend versus the Raiders, lose the next 2 versus the Bills and the Dolphins, and then they're sitting at 1-7. And I'm trying to pick up the schedule quick just so we can. So if that's the case, 1-7, pretty much playoffs are done. I think they'll be competitive versus their next 3 to 4 games after that. Because with Bill in 2020, we even saw they were not a very talented team, but he still was able to get 7 wins out of them. I could see them still beating Ron Rivera's Commanders. I could see them beating the Colts with either Minshew. Yeah, it would be Minshew Madness or Richardson.
Technically he can come back.
Richardson
could come back, but
yeah, that would be Richardson's first game back because he's going on IR.
yeah,
The Giants with Daniel Jones have been a mess, so they could win there. So I could definitely see them losing the next 3 and then dropping to 1-7 with the season essentially done. Or I could see them beating the Raiders. They'll still likely lose to Buffalo, but maybe sneaking out a game versus Miami since they played them tight. And then they could go on that run of Washington beating them, beating the Colts, beating the Giants. They've traditionally played well versus Staley and the Chargers and Justin Herbert, beating the Steelers. And at that point, if everything's going well, you're right now 1-4, 2-4, 2-5, 3-5, 4-5, 5-5, 6-5, 7-5, 8-5. They're 8-5 going into Monday night versus the Chiefs, who they've traditionally schemed up well, and the Chiefs look like they're performing a little worse this year than last year. So even if they lose to the Chiefs, lose to the Bills, I don't see them losing to the Broncos or the Jets at the end of the year. So you could sneak in at 10-7, even with where they are right now. Even 9-8, if you think it's unrealistic that they beat the Bills and the Dolphins. If they beat the Raiders and even lose the next two games to fall to 2-6, they could still make the playoffs at 9-7, depending on how the rest of the conference looks. So I could see them going 6-11. I could see them going 10-7, maybe even 11-5 if they go on a long winning streak and then kind of click and maybe add some talent at wide receiver position based on who's available. It looks like the Broncos are probably going to sell off with Jerry Jeudy possibly being available if they don't think that they're going to sign him long term. Cortland Sutton might be available then. Hunter Renfrow from the Raiders is someone that I think realistically could be available. He's only had 5 catches this year. He's on the last year of his deal, and he's someone that I think would really excel in this offense. Granted, I thought he would have done well with the Raiders considering Josh McDaniels ran the same offense, but he's someone that he's only 27 or 28, I believe. So he's still young, and he's someone that can get separation and give this offense. He would probably be your best receiver by far once he's added, but so there might be players that they can add through trades or free agency. So again, I have no idea. I could see them going 6-11. I could see them going 11 or probably not 11-6, but they could make, I could still see them making the playoffs even with where they are right now.
Yeah, I think that's really the biggest thing, and how much can they really get out of this this whole, I think not tomorrow. Sunday's game will be a really big kind of litmus test to see how much were they able to kind of change around, how much were they able to get back to basics and see there. It still seems like they have the drive and from what everyone's saying. So yeah,
we think this last game it didn't look like they had the drive.
But they're saying the right things.
Yeah.
They're talking the right things. So yeah, it could be I think really one of 3 things, like you said. They could be completely horseshit, which I think is the least likely, where they have like only a few wins. I think the most likely one would be like a middling team. And then the second likely would be they come up with some sort of way to get to 10 or 11 wins, which could happen. They've done it before. It's
even
not the
nine wins the last 2 years got you in the playoffs. So again, it's going to depend on how the rest of the conference plays, because in 2020 you needed, I believe, 12 wins to make the playoffs, whereas the last 2 years you only needed 9. So it's a crapshoot, and that's why the first 2 losses where they played well and had a shot to win at the end kind of comes back to bite you. But they've shown that they can play well against good teams. That's the frustrating part too.
Yeah. All right, moving on to the Raiders. So last year they lost that heartbreaking loss, which should have never really happened. They should have never even gotten to the that Myers throw. That the last touchdown by the Raiders shouldn't have been called a touchdown. Shouldn't have been called back. So they should have actually won that game, and that would have actually put them in the playoffs. So Raiders are their defense is even a little bit, I would say, worse than last year by losing Chandler Jones to craziness. And then the Patriots, obviously, their offense hasn't been clicking the last 2 games here. So I
the
think
Patriots and Raiders are the only 2 teams in the NFL to not score 20 points yet this season.
What?
Patriots or score more than 20 points. Patriots scored 20. I was
going to say they scored against the Eagles.
Yeah, they scored 20 exactly, but the only 2 teams to score less than or not score more than 20.
Yeah, so I think really the biggest thing going to this game, which is actually surprising, is really how Josh's team has looked, where it's a pretty loaded team, at least on offense. Their defense is kind of isn't the greatest.
Outside of Max Crosby, who's arguably one of the best defensive players in football.
Yeah, but they haven't really performed that well, and even the offense hasn't performed that well, which is surprising because number 1, you have all those weapons. Number 2, it's Josh really running the offense, and number 3, of Jimmy Garoppolo being your quarterback.
That's a big reason why the offense has sucked.
So maybe it's something where I'm not going to say this because I don't believe it, but maybe Shanahan was able to get more out of Jimmy than we like to say, but I don't believe that. I think Jimmy's a winner still. I think
I've never thought that.
I'm starting to think that maybe McDaniels might be a loser. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So going into this game, it's going to be a really interesting test just because the two teams aren't really doing that well. So is this a game that they can kind of really beat up on the Raiders somehow and then get them some momentum, get them some hope that they might be able to do something. So um, that's I don't really have too much of a breakdown other than that. I'll leave the rest of the breakdown to you.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that I wanted to look at is just compare how they played last year when they played. So Mac Jones was atrocious last year, 13 of 31 for only 112 yards.
Oh yeah, when I pulled that up, I was shocked. I didn't think he was
Yeah.
that bad during the game.
So essentially a 35% completion percentage. But part of the reason why they had success was Ramondre Stevenson, 19 carries, 172 yards, and a touchdown. And if you don't remember, the Patriots were down, I believe, 17-0 or 17-3 in the third quarter. They were down by a lot. And then the Raiders had almost, that would have been their fifth or sixth loss of the season where they were leading by 10 or more at halftime and then lost the game. But overall, Patriots, what they did was they tried to attack the run, and that helped slow up the pass rush. And Max Crosby wasn't able to have as much success because he had to respect the run with Stevenson. And again, I think that's what the Patriots are going to have to do in this game is establish the run early to slow up the pass rush, and then also do the quick passing game like they did versus the Eagles to also slow up the pass rush. Granted, I said that versus the Cowboys, and the Cowboys were allowing 5.3 yards per carry, and then the Patriots couldn't run the ball against them. 35% of their runs against the Cowboys went for 0 or negative yards. So who really knows based on what this offense really is capable of doing, what the offensive line looks like. But if you want to have success, in my opinion, it starts with the running game. The other thing I'm very curious to see is who is going to match up against Davante Adams. Adams last year, he's arguably one of the top three receivers in football. Last year versus the Patriots, only 4 catches for 28 yards on 9 targets. If Gonzalez was here, I would have said you put him on Adams. It's going to be a tough task again, but try and shut him out. But with Jack Jones likely being out of the game, who are you really going to put up against him? Is it going to be Jonathan Jones, who size wise might not match up well? Are you going to put Miles Bryant with safety help over the top? But again, is Miles Bryant going to be able to really slow down Davante Adams? Are you going to be doing zone defense like you did versus the Saints? So I think this is going to be the biggest.
Is it gonna be J.C. Jackson?
Oh yeah, JC. I forgot. I completely forgot about JC Jackson. It'll likely be JC Jackson, but
Yeah, because JC was on Olave for most of the game last week. So
okay. I completely I forgot that he was added to the team. Sorry about that. But yeah, I think that'll still be a tough test considering JC didn't do well last year. He did well this first game, but even earlier in the season with the Chargers, he wasn't doing well. Granted, I think a lot of that was Staley putting him in positions not to succeed.
Mhm.
But yeah, like you said, it'll probably be JC Jackson on him with safety help over the top. I think that's going to be the biggest test is taking out Josh Jacobs, taking out Davante Adams, and then forcing turnovers. Jimmy G leads the NFL in interceptions with 7, I believe. And the Patriots defense is last in the NFL in turnovers with only 2, with one of them being Gonzalez. And this is a team that I think they had 30 turnovers last year on defense, or maybe it was, I think 30 or 20. Sorry, I'm forgetting. Long day. But this is a team that the defense is supposed to be leading, and they've performed well, but just not taking the ball over as much as they should. And that's something that hopefully this week they're able to find a way to attack the quarterback, attack Jimmy, force him to throw the ball early and get some interceptions, and then maybe fumble if you're able to. But at least 1 or 2 interceptions is what they're going to need.
Yep, or even take Jimmy out of the game because the one thing I will admit with Jimmy is that he's fragile, a
Yeah.
piece of glass, piece of cheese.
Keon
Um,
White. Keon
so
White.
and then you got Brian Hoyer you have to face
Yeah.
likely because the last game they ended up sitting. Even though they started Aiden O'Connell, they ended up having to be the third quarterback when Jimmy was healthy. So I think they'd rather probably have Brian as a go-to guy and have him on the bench than Aiden.
Yeah.
So
In an emergency situation, it's tough to be ready to throw if you're not really prepared. And then
yeah,
Brian Hoyer, granted, you know what you're going to get, but he should at least be prepared.
Yeah. All right. So prediction time. Pats are not favored again. It's right now it went up to +3. It was, I think, +2.5 to start, with a 41.5 for the over under. I think that's actually rather generous for the over under. So I'm going to go with 17-10 Raiders winning this. They still, even though I like to have faith in the Patriots, they just haven't shown enough yet to show that they'll be able to come out of this. I still think they could win it. But if I had to be a betting man, I would not bet for them to win it. So I'll say 17-10 Raiders, and even 10 points, I wouldn't be shocked if it was like a pick six or something. So, all right, Eric, your turn.
Yeah, so again, this is nothing based on what my eyes have seen, especially the last two games. But I think Bill is a better coach than what the media is making him out to be, especially the last two games. I think he's going to find a way to start to turn things around. I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs or anything, but I think they're going to find a way to beat the Raiders. I have the Patriots winning 24-17. Might include a defensive touchdown, like you said. It might not. I also have Chad Ryland missing another field goal, which would have brought it up to 27-17. But so I guess with the over under, that puts me right under at 41. Am I doing my math? Yeah,
It's
41
41.
points. So just under. But I have the Patriots finding a way to win. It might also be my optimism or my hopefulness, since I'm actually going to be at the game and I don't want to see I'll travel all the way to Vegas to see a crappy loss. But
All right. I think one thing too I want to add, which you kind of just mentioned a little bit, would just be everyone that's bashing on Bill right now, which I think is just a little sickening. Where everyone's been waiting what 20 what year we're in 23, so 22 years to kind of really do this. Every single year they try and find a way. This is the end of the dynasty. This is the end of the Patriots. And it's all Tom now, where it's none of it was Bill, and Bill's an idiot of a coach. Everyone forgets what Bill has done for this organization, how good of a coach he actually is.
yeah,
The start of the dynasty, it wasn't Tom leading. Tom was a good factor in it, but Tom wasn't the main factor for at least even the first Super Bowl.
yeah,
That was a big culture change that Bill had instilled, and there was a big defensive team with that team. Um, and Bill was the one that helped coach up Tom and have him understand what it means to be an NFL quarterback and what to see and how to read a defense, even though not to say, read a defense, but read it even better than it was. And then you even look at the Super Bowl in 2018, where if the Patriots defense allowed more points, they would have lost that game. So it was what 13-3.
13-3, and
Yeah.
the Rams were, I think, the second highest scoring offense in
Mhm.
football that year, behind the Chiefs.
Yeah. So between that and then between everything over the years, and you even see it's not a great example just because part of it was the team building aspect, but in 2020 and part of it was
Yeah,
because of COVID. That was probably the worst rostered team we've ever seen from the Patriots,
yeah,
at least in this dynasty. And he was able to somehow manage out 7 wins and could have actually realistically won 11 games that year
yeah.
because they were within one score and had the ball to actually score in multiple opportunities.
The
And they
Buffalo
could have
Bills
actually
fumble, the fumble versus the Dolphins.
Mhm. There was the Seahawks game. There was
Yep.
the I think it was a
Cam
Raiders
the
game too, right?
They beat the Raiders. The
All
Chiefs
right.
game where Cam got COVID and
Mhm.
then Brian Hoyer crapped himself, and then the
Yeah.
Patriots held the Chiefs to, I think, 19 points, but
Mhm.
one of them I think was a fumble return for a touchdown, or
Yeah.
picks Jared Stidham pick six
Mhm.
or something. But
But again, the Bill has done so much for this team, and that's to say just to keep him around because he's had a past resume,
yep,
but there's nothing to say that he doesn't know how to coach anymore. He doesn't know how to build up this team.
yep,
So I'm sticking with him. Do or
yeah,
die. I will go down with the ship with Bill. I
me
will
too.
root for him. If God forbid Robert was to ever get rid of him, I will root for him wherever team he goes with.
Same.
And I
And
know
then
we'll be right.
I texted you this today too, Kevin, and I'll just bring this up is one thing that might help Bill in his favor, especially if the Patriots kind of don't turn things around, is the grass isn't always greener on the other side, with Exhibit A being Josh McDaniels. If Josh McDaniels stayed with the Patriots, never left, and then Bill retired or was gone, chances are he would be the next Patriots head coach. And then Robert Kraft knows that. Josh McDaniels left to go to an absolutely loaded Raiders team, traded for a team that made it to the playoffs the year before, lost essentially because of the refs to the Bengals, who went all the way to the Super Bowl and almost won the Super Bowl. Then they traded for Chandler Jones. Granted, again, we know the
He's
issues with
crazy
that.
now, but
Traded for Devontae Adams and has been atrocious as a head coach. I think he's 7-20 with the Raiders or something along the, maybe that was before last night's game. So just you don't always know what you're going to get with a head coach, even if with a new head coach, even if you like them. And with Bill, you at least know X's and O's. Granted, the last 2 games aren't a good look, especially because they were the worst losses of his career. But you at least know what you're getting. You know, schematically, he should be the favor of the coach that is playing that weekend. Granted, the roster decisions are another issue. Maybe that's something that might be a strong focal point, that some tension here and there. But at least at the head coaching position, you essentially know what you got in Bill, whereas you don't know what you're going to be getting with whoever walks through that door next.
Yep, good point. So again, even that roster point, maybe it's something that Bill's not an idiot. He realizes when he makes mistakes. So he's definitely probably realizing now that he needed to put more emphasis on things. So and he always tries to make decisions to rectify that. So I've got my faith in him, and I still think that he'll be able to turn this team around. Hopefully that happens, and we'll see. So again, we'll talk to you guys next week. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and Twitter, or now called X, Pat's 300 Level Pod, patslevelpod.com. Follow us on YouTube as well. Subscribe, rate, and review. Get those reviews up on Apple. We got a couple good ones on there, one bad one. So like to even that out. So again, thank you guys. Look forward to talking to you guys next week, and hopefully it is a Patriots victory.